Hello, my name is Emily and I am a beekeeper. In the past year that I've been a beekeeper, I have learned that honeybees have a strong impact on our ecosystem as they support the survival of plant life and create a significant ripple effect on other living organisms. They have a crucial impact on our food system through their vital role as pollinators and their production of honey. The health of a honeybee is key to ensuring that they have the continued ability to perform these vital actions to the best of their ability. There are many persistent threats to a honeybee's health, such as parasites, disease, herbicides, and more. In this video, I will explore the threat of the Varroa mite and their effect on honeybee populations and the economic impact that their presence has on colonies and the agricultural industry. When becoming first interested in beekeeping, prospective beekeepers will often be encouraged to take a short course where they can learn the basics of becoming a successful beekeeper. These courses cover materials such as how to manage a hive and the important steps to take to maintain the health of the colony. For Sybil Preston, the Maryland State Beekeeping Inspector and my beekeeping short course instructor, the most important information conveyed is about the Varroa mite.
So I educate beekeepers on how to keep their hives healthy from Varroa. I educate them on how to check for Varroa, and I educate them the options if they need to treat for Varroa. My position does not regulate Varroa management and or Varroa treatment. So mostly my job is with Varroa mite is an educator.
Okay.
This education will include teaching prospective beekeepers the methods that can be used to test for Varroa and the treatment options available should treatment be necessary. While Varroa monitoring is an important aspect of beekeeping, it is an aspect that is not mandated by law or regulated in Maryland. This means that it is the individual beekeeper's decision whether they treat Varroa mites or not. While Sybil strongly believes that conveying the gravity of the Varroa mite, she occasionally encounters those who purposefully do not treat their hives. On occasion, these choices are an economic decision.
I met a beekeeper who does not treat for Varroa, does not take the time to, worry about it. He buys bees every year. Okay. He buys packages. He gathers as much honey, keeps them as healthy as he can. Gets a honey crop, sells the honey crop, and he doesn't put money into. He can make more money on selling the honey than putting money into the Varroa treatments. Varroa management can get costly. Right. So, buying a package of bees is about $140, $130, somewhere in that range. And then the different treatments, how much do they cost? And he cuts all of that by just buying bees, selling the honey off of them. And he doesn't, because it is economically, it is costly to treat for Varroa.
This can be frustrating for other beekeepers, as this increases the chance of Varroa being spread between the hives within flight ranges of one another. However, it is not regulated or enforced management practice and will therefore always create an issue.
When people let their Varroa go unchecked, that it affects the colonies around them. So you are impacting your neighbor's bees when you don't treat your mites. Actually, at the time that I took the class in 1996, 97, I guess it was 97, they were calling it Varroa jacobsoni. They didn't even know the real name of it yet. They weren't even calling it Varroa destructor. It wasn't called or being called by its correct name. Mm-hmm. So they weren't educating beekeepers on it at that point.
The Varroa mite has a significant impact on honeybees, and while effective treatments are available, their application is not regulated and therefore not mandatory. The presence of the Varroa mite is felt deeply by both the colony and the beekeeper. Costs for testing and treating a colony for Varroa are high, and as the costs rise, it becomes difficult for the beekeeper to become profitable from their honey production.
We do monitor for Varroa, and we do keep statistics on Varroa. But we don't regulate it. So, it's something that the beekeeper can choose to take care of or not take care of. Like late 80s that it came here. And then it was the later 90s when we started treating for, like mid 90s when it was like they put out a treatment, and I don't think we took it serious though until the early 2000s. I mean, it was mentioned. They didn't. There was no information on its life cycle. There was no information on how, why is it, what is it doing in the colony? How is it feeding? How is it reproducing? They were teaching none of that. They had no idea. And that was in 97. And I was taught that you just put in the fall, you just put these strips in and just, that's it. So the Apistan strips with a chemical called fluvalinate. And that was it. That was all that was being taught. And so for like 3 years of mismanagement and no research, well, they were researching it, we just didn't have the data yet. And then in early 2000s, that's when, they started having bigger losses. And then more research and whatnot was done. Okay, we can't continue to use the same chemical because it's becoming resistant. And then at some point we had the phenomena around the nation called colony collapse disorder. And they were saying that they thought it had something to do with Varroa. And at that point they knew it was Varroa destructor. They knew it was reproducing in the colony. But they weren't quite, every year or every time they do more research, they find out a little more. Oh, okay, it's feeding on the hemolymph. Is at that point they thought it was feeding on the blood of the bee, because they found bees with the Varroa attached. So feeding on the blood of the bee. And then, it wasn't until 2 years ago that Dr. Sammy Ramsey out of University of Maryland figured out that it's actually feeding on the fat body, the liver of the bee, not the blood of the bee. So, it's taken this long. But I think at that point, early in the 2000s, when colony collapse happened and all of that, there was a lot more treatments had been approved by the FDA.
Some beekeepers turn towards pollination contracts. They will transport their hives to areas such as California for the production of almonds. These contracts aren't always the best option, but are sometimes necessary to sustain their businesses.
But if you're getting $10 a pound, or actually, I guess after you take out money for your bottle and your label, so $8 a pound that you would be making, and each colony made you say 100 pounds. So the money would be, I don't know, equal to what you're putting back into it. I feel like,
yeah, it's a self-sustaining system. It doesn't really ever create profit.
It's kind of, but again, you're not, no one's getting paid for their time, and so economically, is beekeeping a way to make money? I guess if you have less than a couple hundred colonies, probably not.
While this has a significant impact on beekeepers, it also has a significant impact on the farmers that share these pollination contracts with the beekeepers and their yield. In agricultural settings where pollinators are present, yield from crops is often higher. This is what makes pollination contracts desirable for farmers.
I think that's kind of like the trickle-down effect. If the grower isn't making as much for sale, and the bees are stressed, and and he has to pay the beekeeper, who is only getting, say, $200 for the hive, and he's probably turning around, and with that, not his time. Beekeepers never get paid for their time, but if he's turning around and putting say $120 worth of products or $100 worth of products into the colony, at least, is he actually making any money? There's a need in the state for more education. That's just to educate beekeepers on how serious it is, on how serious of an issue that Varroa is. I think the new statistic that I heard the researcher at University of Maryland say, 60% of all first-year beekeepers will lose their colony. or colonies because of the not understanding fully, how much of an impact that Varroa makes on the colony or on colony health.
While pollination contracts present income for the beekeeper, it is not without an incurred cost of maintaining the health of the bees during this time. This often means that they are treating the hives more frequently and taking on a higher cost. Often, they may break even from their income and costs spent to maintain the hive during the pollination contract, but this often doesn't include the time that they spent in the hive.
And the ultimate effect on the orchard that you're pollinating for, if I think I read somewhere that I can't remember the exact numbers, but something like, without honeybees, almond groves can produce like 20 bushels of almonds. But with honeybees, the trees produce 200 bushels. So it is an exorbitant amount higher with your pollination. It's the commercial beekeepers are treating their colonies at least 4 times a year now. So if you thought about the cost of formic treatments or Apiguard treatments, Apivar treatments 4 times a year, that's quite costly. Versus how much are you gaining from your pollination contract? If per beehive, if you're making $200, are you putting 200? I would think that you're putting pretty close to $200 in the colony. I don't know of any farmers who are doing that, because typically if a farmer is dealing with a beekeeper, it's a private contract, and then the beekeeper just moves bees in. I would think that with the higher losses that Maryland sees, I would think that pollination maybe suffers a little bit, but there are no statistics on that.
Okay.
You'd have to get farmers to reply to a census, and the beekeeper to reply, and that's just not going to happen.
So, what role does this have with beekeeping practices in Maryland? We know that there are no state laws for regulating the management of Varroa, but what laws do exist in Maryland to maintain bees? While there's not a high average Varroa count for the state of Maryland, what can we do to improve the rate of colony loss due to Varroa?
Part of the law that I regulate is the fact that you have to register your colonies.
Okay.
That is part of the regulation. But I think the biggest part of my job is an educator.
Okay.
When I'm out doing inspections, I'm trying to teach the beekeeper, best management practices.
Mm-hmm.
So.
It can be frustrating to deal with Varroa mites and the threats they pose to colonies when accessible and effective treatment exists. However, because treatment is not mandatory, it continues to cause issues for the colony and the beekeeper. As
long as the bees are rearing brood and there's one Varroa mite in that colony, we're going to have Varroa reproduction. You can't get away from it. The one who's spreading the word on Varroa is, gets a gold star.